الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر.
In the Holy Quran, you will find that there are certain key themes and specific topics which have been mentioned and emphasized by Allah quite frequently throughout the text. These particular points and subjects have been repeated by the Almighty many times over, occurring in numerous different places throughout the various chapters of the Holy Quran. Back when we were just young students, dedicatedly learning the intricacies of Arabic grammar and striving to truly understand the Quran in its own beautiful original language as it was first revealed to the Prophet, we often found ourselves feeling quite surprised, wondering why Allah chooses to repeat the exact same thing in many different ways and styles so very often throughout the book. For example, Allah has already clearly stated in the text that He is the one who created this entire vast universe and everything that exists within it today. Simply saying it once should surely be enough for anyone to understand. Allah stated clearly that the creator of all things is truly alone and without any equal in power. He has no partner whatsoever. Again, once is quite enough. Then there is the third major theme which Allah mentions quite extensively throughout the verses of the Quran, is the fundamental reality that you do not simply perish and vanish into nothingness after death, but rather you will eventually be resurrected by the Almighty for final judgment. Saying it just once is more than enough for a believer. It is truly sufficient. Then, as the message continues to unfold within the sacred text, it warns that for those who are disobedient to His commands, there is the fire of hell, while for the righteous people who follow the path of good deeds, the great reward they will receive will be in the form of paradise. Just stating it once is sufficient, is enough. I remember a classmate of mine, I mentioned this to him too, how Allah Almighty repeatedly, over and over, this same theme in different ways. Specific commandments in the Quran are actually quite few. The actual direct orders like do this action or do not do that are very few in number compared to other subjects. Most of the divine emphasis in the Quran is actually placed on these particular themes. A friend of mine also said something then which did not quite make sense to me, but now, looking back, it makes perfect sense. He told me that, brother, you must realize this Quran is meant to be a guide for non-Muslims just as much as us. Since we are born Muslims, we often feel like it is repetitive because we already have the firm faith and conviction regarding who it was that created this vast universe, namely that Allah created everything, that the Creator is truly one and that He has no partner or equal who shares in His divine authority over all of creation. We believe that we do not simply cease to exist after our death. Rather, there is life once again, followed by an eternal destination in either paradise or hell. We were fortunate enough to be born into a Muslim society, which is why we sometimes feel that Allah is repeating this message over and over again throughout the Quran. But if you take a step back and look at humanity as a whole, how many people in the world today actually believe in this fundamental truth of the hereafter? How many people are there currently living in the world who say that the universe was made automatically or that everything simply evolved into its current existence without a creator? And how many people in this world claim that there are partners with Allah? The reality is that most people in the world today are effectively polytheists in their beliefs. Some have associated Jesus, the son of Mary, with Him, while others have associated various idols. Those who truly believe in only one God are actually quite few in number. Then even among those who do believe in one God, there are many who deny the hereafter, flatly refusing to believe that a day of resurrection will ever truly happen. And furthermore, many people who do believe in the hereafter lack a proper concept of heaven and hell. That was the specific answer they gave me back then, finally understood. I was somewhat satisfied, but it felt to me that for Muslims, these topics have effectively become boring, Meaning that while there is attraction for non-Muslims, I wondered what the attraction could possibly be for us. Brother, am I making my point clear to you with this explanation? Since we already believe, it feels like there is no attraction left for us. However, Allah repeats this subject in various ways. And this is a true sign of the Quran's eloquence. The point is that the linguistic style is never just one single way, as each time it is uniquely different. So for us, brother, there wouldn't really be any attraction then, right? But now, when I take a closer look at it and reflect more deeply on it, so it seems, brother, as much as this is for non-Muslims, it is meant for us as well. The main problem we face is that while we verbally accept the fact that there is only one God, we often fail to internalize that belief in a way that truly changes our actions and our overall perspective on life. That the universe wasn't self-made but was created by Him, that there's life after death, heaven and hell, We accept it intellectually, but perhaps not truly from the heart. However, our daily actions often show that this type of belief and actual disbelief are practically one and the same, because we do not live as if we truly believe in what we say. The companions of the Prophet were the true examples of believers. For instance, during the historical battle of Uhud, when the fighting was intense, the fight was actively going on, and many brave people were being martyred on the field. A companion asked, "If I am martyred, where will I go?" The Prophet said, "Paradise." At that moment, he was eating dates and said, "The time it would take to finish these few dates is far too long. I can see that paradise is right there. Should I finish these dates before going to paradise? Why not go right now, brother?" So he went forward and was martyred. The massive difference between his firm faith and ours. Do we really have that same level of absolute certainty about the existence of paradise? Paradise has not yet truly settled in our own hearts as it did theirs, yet for them, it made them willing to lay down their very lives. And yet, our supposed hope for reaching paradise does not even manage to lead us out of bed for the early Fajr prayer. Just see how we drag ourselves to the mosque like sluggish addicts, as if a heavy corpse is being exhumed from a dark grave. Isn't that exactly how it is for us? We constantly seek loopholes in every command of Sharia. In business, people exploit others so much, and brother, this whole situation is just so deeply concerning for everyone. This network marketing system, where they call it network marketing and use various blockchains, this specific method of trade and commerce is clearly forbidden according to our Islamic law. How many people actually quit after learning this? Have they really? No, they are doing it, earning money non-stop without any hesitation. Interest is clearly forbidden, a literal declaration of war against Allah, is it not? Then how can interest-based banks operate so freely even within an Islamic land like ours? It is the pilgrims and regular worshippers who are bank managers. What do you think? You say the government runs them, but how? Does the government push these banks on wheels? Of course not. It runs them through the work of people. And the people working in all these banks are our brothers, are 99% those who recite the creed. And regarding this banking being forbidden, there is no disagreement among Deobandis, Barelvis or Ali Hadith. People say there are actually so many differences among these scholars, so who should we listen to? But brother, these differences don't actually exist in all matters of the faith at all. I remember that my elder brother once had a close friend of his who was in a very similar situation as this. He held a very high position in a local bank and sought a formal religious ruling about his bank job. They told him it was forbidden, and a fatwa was eventually issued. From Binori town, the verdict was that it's forbidden, but he said, "What do these local scholars know?" He asked around and everyone said it's forbidden. He argued these are just Indo-Pak scholars, and since Islam originated in Arabia, he should ask the Arabs. He got a ruling from Saudi Arabia, which also said it's forbidden. He went there himself, but then he claimed that the real authority in these matters is Al-Azhar. The famous Al-Azhar University is many centuries old. He got a ruling from there too, forbidden, but having the fear of God in his heart, he quit. He saw no one was giving him any leeway, even after asking the Barelvis. They also said it's forbidden. The Ali Hadith said forbidden too. So he finally quit, though 99% of people usually don't. On one hand, there are such grave warnings in the Quran. Be warned of war from Allah and His Messenger if you do not finally give up all interest-based dealings immediately. A declaration of war from Allah and His Messenger. Can there be any threat greater than this? Brother, a declaration of war means that for an enemy, everything is considered fair game and permissible. Yet day after day, if you try to tell the bank manager, "Brother, this is forbidden," he simply claims, "I am doing it out of necessity." And then they often say, forbidden things become permissible in times of dire need. But what real need is there, brother? In this supposed need, the manager is driving around comfortably in a brand new Land Cruiser. It is such a severe necessity that traveling in rickshaws and chinchis is unbearable. Allah truly made the forbidden permissible in necessity. It's in the Quran. In cases of true necessity, what does Allah make the forbidden thing? He makes it permissible. Allah says, "We have not placed any excessive hardship for you in your religion." But Allah has described that hardship. If you are starving to death, your stomach sticks to your spine, and survival is at stake, then swine flesh Allah has. It is made permissible just to save your own life. For saving your life is always the first priority. So if the bank manager knows for sure that if he quits his job, he will struggle for food, have no bread to eat, and will literally die of hunger, well, when you are actually about to die, then you can go ahead, brother. Now, I am including myself in this as well. I am not just blaming anyone else. We are all like this. Our words are very grand, but our actions are not. Verbally, we all claim to have faith in paradise, faith in hell, and faith in Allah, yet the true and sincere demand of faith remains largely unmet by us. One who truly believes in the reality of paradise doesn't act as we do in our daily lives. It was only the companions of the Prophet who truly lived up to that standard. So it becomes very clear that merely professing faith with your tongue is not enough. Rather, it is absolutely essential to cultivate and actively build that faith deep within your soul. It must descend deep into the heart. This universe did not just emerge by itself out of nothing. Someone created it, and there is indeed a powerful and wise creator behind it. He is the one with no partner sharing his divinity. Yet see how much shirk prevails among us Muslims today. Allah repeatedly forbids shirk. We might think it enough to mention a topic once, but polytheistic tendencies among Muslims have grown so vast. I mean, Muslims as a community, those identified as Muslims, they are so many that it seems no matter how much you refuted shirk, O Allah, you should have condemned it even more and even more frequently throughout the text. Yet, on various pretexts, they still manage to find some form of shirk to practice every day. Consider the state of shirk today, and then take a hard look at the current state of our actual practical belief in the coming reality of the hereafter. Even when they are facing the final moment of death, many people nowadays, they are not ready to change. Previously, if someone suffered a heart attack, they would behave like a decent person as a sign from God. Now, brother, a clear sign has appeared. Son, improve yourself now and start to act like a human being. We used to see people whenever a serious illness struck them, they became very pious after repenting because God gave them a jolt. Now I will behave properly. They'd start their prayers and even grow a beard. Now after suffering 3 heart attacks, as soon as they finally regain consciousness after their major operation, the very first thing they choose to do is sit down in bed and immediately turn on the television to watch something. As soon as they wake up, they ask, "Hey, what's going on? Who won the cricket? Who is playing? What's the news? Tell me the score, man. Actually, they just gave me an injection for a bit. I was unconscious. Tell me the score." It means your priorities, your very priorities have shifted completely. There's a verse by a poet, isn't there? Eyes directed toward the world while your feet walk toward the grave. Where are you heading and where are you really looking? Step by step and day by day we move closer, moving towards the grave. So, these core subjects that the Quran has described are just as important for the disbelievers as they are for those who consider themselves to be believers. Even more significant for the Muslims. There is one thing we realized after reading the Quran. I came to the seminary for this very reason. I asked my teacher, if I enroll in the madrasa, will I be able to understand the Quran in Arabic? Will I understand what the Imam recites during the prayer? He replied, why wouldn't you? This became a major draw for me to understand the Quran in its own language. See, translations lack that true essence. Translations lose that special flavor. Whenever you translate a language, the soul of the text just vanishes. The Quran was revealed in Arabic, not in English or Urdu. Knowing Arabic reveals its true depth, once you become familiar with its tone and nuances. So then we began studying books of Arabic literature. We studied poetry and all of that because a language cannot be learned from a single book unless you read its entire literature. So as we studied, we soon realized that the actual themes of the Quran are nothing like the trivial things and petty disputes that we usually find ourselves so deeply entangled in every single day. The Quran doesn't even give any real importance or lasting value to those worldly things at all.